We're live.
Well, hello, everyone. What a delight it is to be with all of you here today for Cultivating Voices live poetry on our second reading of August. How did we get to August already? You're here today for our new books showcase because that's what we do every second and fourth Sunday of the month. We feature poets whose books have launched during this past pandemic year in support of their fabulous poetry and in support of our desire to listen to exceptional poetry. Well, I'm Sandy Yannone. I'm your host. I'm the author of Boats for Women from Salmon Poetry, and I'm joining you today from my wacky little kitchen here in Olympia, Washington. Thank you so much to those of you joining us live here in Zoom. And of course, a romper room hello to those of you watching us live from Facebook for today's reading from our, as I said, our very luminous trio of poets, Lillo, Alice Pettway, and Julie Marie Wade. What I found so interesting in putting this reading together was listen to the last parts of your names. Way, Pettway, and Wade. Is anybody else a total nerd and notice that? Like I did. There you go. I love that. I love the wordplay. Well, I've had the privilege to attend readings in person and virtually with all three of today's poets. So I know we are absolutely about to experience the art, the necessity, and the mindfulness of their poetry's gifts. I know that you have many options for readings, and so I very much appreciate you returning week after week to our reading series, whether that's here in person or listening on when we have our recordings. As you know, we seek to offer a unique combination of writers, and I want to give a thanks again to everyone last week who joined us for our wild card open mic. We've been providing this virtual reading series since March 2020. We have 2,800 members in an intergenerational, intersectional, and international Facebook group is how it started. And we've been keeping up with our weekly reading series. I certainly hope that you'll consider purchasing at least one, if not two, if not three collections today. As your resources allowed, I'll be putting links to the chat, links for our esteemed readers in the chat for you today. And the chat is live for you to send out your appreciation, interest, and just good cheer and good naturedness. So please do send the love out to our writers. Well, first reading today is Lillo, whose Lillo's poetry collection is Lend Me Your Wings. I first met Lillo in the Seattle area. So I love it when I can claim that I'm seeing a person that I've met in person, heard read in person. It's because it's been a while. So it's been a while since that reading, but it's also been a while since I've been able to go to a live reading. So I'm appreciative to be able to introduce her. Lillo's work has been described by Ellen Bass as rich in music and in imagination, a celebration and a joy. I can attest to those things that Ellen Bass has said. And Lend Me Your Wings was released in just last month from Shanti Arts Publishing. However, her chapbook also that you can get, Dubious Moon won the Slapping Hall Press chapbook contest. We had Slapping Hall Press with us earlier this spring. so you know that the poetry is terrific. Her poems have also won the E.E. Cummings Award and a Florida Review Editor's Prize, and have appeared in such journals as New Letters, Poet Lore, Tampa Review, the Louisville Review, Poetry East, and in numerous anthologies. Way has received grants from the NEA, the New York State Council on the Arts, and the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation for her choreographic work involving poetry. And if we're lucky, we'll hear a little bit about what that means. I know what that means because I've heard her talk about this before. Would you please welcome Lillo Way? Hello.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Sandra, for that truly wonderful introduction. Wow. And a big thank you to everyone who's watching today. You are why we are here. And it's for you that we write, well, I'll speak for myself. It's for you that I write my poems, the readers, watchers, and listeners. So deep thanks to you. I'm honored to be reading with Alice and Julie, and I can't wait to hear them read their poems. All right, lend me your wings. My publisher's description on the back of the book says, the poems in this award-winning collection take the reader on a ride with things that fly, including the poet's grandmother, who is an aerialist with Barnum and Bailey Greatest Show on Earth, birds, ghosts, insects, ancestors, an angel or two, as well as humans attempting to flee. So some of the poems I'll read for you today address these themes directly and some indirectly. I thought I'd begin with a short, light poem as kind of an appetizer. Starlets. 18 starlings strung along a power cable. Sunlings, really, daybirds, shining blacker than night in the light of the longest day, all watching in the same direction, as if danger couldn't possibly approach from tailward. A chorus line in a shallow proscenium theater, each chorine staring straight downstage, world's shortest legged rockets, shuffling a little up or down the line. You figure it's the best they can do, forgetting that their dance is all pent up, waiting in the wings. This next poem is about the moon, not the full moon or the new moon. It's about a half moon. Frame the moon, furred out, cased, paned, and trimmed, the opening of a window. From my position here on the floor in supine half-spinal twist, my quarter revolving eye catches a perfectly sliced in half moon centered in the upper right corner of the upper left pane of a window blued by a sky somewhere between baby boy daytime and electric transvestite midnight. The perfect globe cleavered by a celestial butcher boy. The first half of hope, not the last. Depending, I suppose, on your viewing point, mine being spine suppliant to floor, floor kissing the earth and holding the kiss, earth sucking me hard, the half moon mullioned and muntoned, 1/4 millionth of a light year away, beaming me up and off from here, half an inkling that when the bones wave their white phalanges of surrender to whatever pulls us down, some unthing, some weightless, scentless, tasteless, wan thing draws me up into a moon's glowy, showy, half-assed bliss. Let's see, what shall I say about this one? I feel there's a slight sense of Nina in this poem. Nina, the character in Anton Chekhov's play, The Seagull. but no one's ever mentioned that. So if you know the play and you feel like responding in the chat, I'd love to hear if you sensed Nina's presence a little bit. Child on the Delta shore. She's never here without the dog. Only excuse for escape, walk the dog. Out the door, she marvels that such a home as hers would have a dog. She thanks the dog, spelling it backwards and frontwards. She thinks stifling house, she means house on fire. Dog digs up the wrung wings of a water bird tangled in shad tails. Beneath them, a beaded skull, gift wrapped in seaweed and the snake roots of last year's water lilies. The child's thumbs smooth the bones. And though she's never seen a bird skeleton before, she knows the gull shape of it, the girl shape of it, knows I am this bird. Her chin floats up, her scapulae lift, elbows, wrists, fingertips fly far from her sternum, reach beyond her dream, catch a thermal. A gray gull's wingtips are lit silver in solos of light, salty hunger of its scream reed-pitched for fish flesh. Not an ugly screech to her ears. Where gulls are, open sea isn't far. She imagines a paint-peeled boat, dog perched in its bow, the alphabet spilled across its stern, out of here. I'd like to read you a poem called Appropriation. If I were an artist, I'd paint this room. A living room it is, and one in front of which I am entitled to put the first person singular possessive, as if I were the lighting designer who created this morning sunshine and divided it by 56 window panes, the dyer who spilled it across the fabric of the furniture, the refinisher who varnished it on oak floors, someone a lifetime ago troubled to inlay with a double dark border. As if I were one of a dozen children who sat to countless dinners at what is now a library table, into which I did not grind my first food stains, nor apply the paint, still flecking its underside spring green. Oh, I've read the bright books lining the end wall, but I didn't write one of them, nor did I design their jackets or make their paper from trees, mix the ink, set the type. And I did not weave the rich, complex rug in rich, complex Afghanistan, or wear the Sarawak basket on my back in the forests of Borneo. Nor was I the animal who gave its skin for the lid. It wasn't I who freed the African stool from a trunk with rough tools to bend its knees bow-legged between brown earth and brown sky. But it is the flesh of my back this morning sun's a radiant heater to. And if the sun grows too hot, it's my sweat. And it's my broken face slivered in the 18th century mirror, fire singed and thinned. The epigraph to this poem, entitled Offering, reads, for David S. Buckle, environmentalist and Lambda lawyer, who on April 14th, 2018, self-immolated in Prospect Park, Brooklyn. Offering. Oh, lion tail, swing yourself, arc, arch, strike the match, its shocking bloom. flame-haired devouring eye satisfied. Lion-hungry belly, fill with him, that you might spare the children. You fire-breathing beasts of despair, with all your heads and horns, your long tail scales fray the rope, tip the hope balance farther, a little farther toward no more. Ting! The finger symbol rings flawless into the night. Ting! Twice more. Funeral flares fling embers into our ears before the final silence, when children's mouths will fill with ash. Unbuckle him, unburn him, unfuel his futile flames, unfossil the fumes, regold them, fold him in our unarmed arms. That poem I would describe as passionate and word drunk. This one is simple, quiet, and short. Country sauna. Small talk drops away when we're beating our backs 10 to a room. Sweat and live switches, their leaves still green, and coals made incense. Like a simple wooden chapel, this Finnish sauna, where we women come in peace, naked, offer a few words, leave grief in the anteroom with our clothes hanging on pegs. Ancient women. Only the stitching is new. Opposite me, 2 breasts among 3 women. A ruddy grandchild, dog hair stuck to her wet skin, wanders in and out. We go plunge in a lake. And I'll close with thanks again to everyone who is here today. And with a poem called Manifesto After Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry being the great and beloved writer of fiction, poetry, and essays. Manifesto After Wendell Berry. Expect the end of your nation as you know it. Plant alternate rows of weeping and laughter. Loosen your mind, drop it in the brown earth where it will take root or become compost. Invest in the slow moving, the tortoise. Plant white oak trees. Call the golden insects eating the undersides of leaves prophet. Praise horsetail, morning glory, dandelion. Have faith in weeds and all things uncontrollable. Say your main crop is stars, their constellations, your formal garden. Ask who will harvest. Put your faith in ashes after wildfire. Prophecy flood. Listen to the rain on the roof, on the broad and narrow leaves. Say your main crop is talk. Count noise as profit. Donate your living ears, plant giant voids. Gather the echoes. Put your faith in rodents. Leave them the house in your will. Prophecy insects. Put your ears close to the crisp shells of cicadas. Water your fields with tears. Call salt prophet. Ask who will lick. Invest in dark colors. Harvest mushrooms, moss, and mast. Pledge allegiance to the most beautiful thing you can think of. Among so many candidates, how will you ever choose?
Oh, how could one not, in hearing the poetry of Lend Me Your Wings, not feel uplifted by the aerialist of words that you shared with us today? Thank you. I feel like I was watching the great Walendas on the high wire.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you.
The
So much.
high wire of poetry.
Oh, there is a poem about them in there.
I also want to just give you, particularly, and everyone else, a little preview. In the fall, we're going to be having a themed open mic, and the theme is wings. I hope you'll come back and read with us.
I won't
It's probably
miss
going to
that.
be in October.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everybody, you can get a copy of Lend Me Your Wings and fly through the air in all the ways possible. You've seen it in the chat. Please consider adding Lillo's collection to your constellation of poetry. And thank you for joining us today. Well, next is one of my salmon sisters. I always have to give a shout out to my siblings. I always do it. You know, those of you who've been with me during this past year and a half, you know that I always do this. So it always is a great joy to have one of my siblings on the program. And I wanted to give a particular shout out and let you know that Alice is going to be featured in an issue of the Bitter Oleanders autumn issue with a very an interview and 15 poems, and it proves to just be very insightful, and wanted to just give a little shout out to the Bitter Oleander for featuring Alice, and just sending out the love to that particular journal. So it's always good to share the love wherever we can. So be looking for that this upcoming autumn. Well, in other realms, here's a little more about Alice. Alice Pettway is the author of The Time of Hunger, Moth, and her latest collection, Station Lights, all from Salmon Poetry. And her poetry has appeared in places like Anye, the Bitter Oleander, as we just mentioned, Rattle, great recording of a reading from Rattle earlier this year, the Southern Review, the Three Penny Review, and many other respected publications. She's a former Chulitna artist and Lily Peter Fellow, and this upcoming September will be an artist in resident at Art Omni. Currently, Alice lives, writes, and I think takes an occasional hike, if I'm not mistaken, in near and dear to Seattle, Washington. Would you please welcome Alice Pettway?
It's so great to be here, Sandy. I appreciate that you bring everyone together like this. And thank you to everyone who's here listening. It has not been an easy 18 months, going on 2 years for anyone, but I think if there's anything beautiful that's come out of this, it's that we've found ways to come together remotely. And I hope we hang on to that, because this is beautiful. We get to see each other even though we don't live next door. So I value that every time that I get to see poets and poetry lovers all in one place. And I am thrilled, Lillo, that was such an amazing reading. I'm still kind of digesting. I need a second. I feel like, can we just pause so I can think about that a little longer and then, then I'll read. But those poems will be in my mind for the rest. I mean, not just the day, but for much longer than that. And Julie, I really look forward to hearing your work. Today, I'm going to be reading, as Sandy mentioned, out of my new book, Station Lights. And it is from Salmon Poetry. And I love reading with one of my Salmon sisters as well. I think, I was going to start with the title poem, which is Shanghai. And this book was written, it is not about China or Shanghai in any way, but it was written in that context. And I was living in Shanghai for 3 years, and it is very much, it is about my feelings of separation and disorientation in that setting, and also moments of great beauty and commonality and humanity. But I always feel that I need some sort of disclaimer that it is not a book about Shanghai. It is a book about me in Shanghai. And on that, as I said, I was going to start with the title poem, but I think because Lillo read that beautiful poem about saunas, I'm going to skip to one of my, we all have our babies in our books, and I'm going to skip to one called Bathhouse that just resonated with me as I was listening to you read. So I think I'm going to skip and start with that one, if I can find it. Why am I not finding it? Okay, we'll get to it. I'll start with Shanghai. We'll get to it as I come to it in the book. Okay. This morning, you mistook the teapot for a shoe. Understandable in this city where transubstantiation is no more divine than washwater tossed on the street. I conduct tests to determine our evolving composition. We float more easily than when we arrived at this seaside. We are becoming smog, dumpling steam, phlegm in an old man's throat. Who knows where it may lead? Maybe one morning I will be the shoe and you the teapot. Our neighbors will carry us home finally. I would like that. You on the stove, me by the door, each of us sure of purpose and place. This next one is titled Mnemonics, and I think we've all experienced lately a sense of disorientation that I mentioned earlier, and are finding new ways of remembering ourselves and the world and our communities. This is about that, how we find our way to that. I can't recall your name, but I know your fingers held glass, how you touched your napkin to the rim just as a drop descended, the color of shoes you left by the door when you arrived. I know you in the same way I know one convertible started a world war and another a conspiracy theory. The way I know which Christmas present is mine once it's opened, even if the tag fell off. A friend told me the trick to remembering is to build a house in your mind, cut glass knobs and waxed floorboards to transfigure each gossamer fact into a shelved book. It never worked. I search for titles and find stories in blank-spined volumes. It upsets some people, this inability of mine to remember labels, as if I'm an ill-tempered child unwilling to box up my toys before bed. There is something wondrous about strewing life's baubles where they are certain to pierce an unsuspecting foot. Aha, I found it. Okay, now we're going to do Bathhouse. It was hiding. This is One of my favorite things and anchor points for me while I was in Shanghai was the experience of going to different bathhouses. The Korean bathhouse was very close to my heart in particular. Something about that experience of just being humans together, shedding all of the observation and judgment of our bodies and our clothing and our various accoutrements, to just be together as we naturally are, was one of the most powerful experiences I think I've had, period, in my life. This one is titled simply Bathhouse. I am hungry for the curve of stomach, for stubble, a ripple of fat. And even though I know I am not supposed to, I memorize the thighs beside me, the press of muscle and flesh under the water. The women of my childhood were draped like furniture for a long absence, their shapes mysterious and ripe for speculation. Next to me, a woman bathes, running her hand between the folds of her skin as comfortably as my mother ran her hands over a soapy plate. Maybe when I return home from this place where we are allowed to know each other, I will walk naked among the houses, calling out to the girls who live there and may never see any breast but their own unless they run into the street to witness mine. I don't know if other readers see this poem this way, but I personally feel like this poem is the flip side of Bathhouse. It's so I'll see what you think if you feel that as well. Defense mechanism. In the cold months, my hands reach for warmth. One sweater at first, then another. A coat found on a bench. Wool knitted on small needles. Quills bristling from rayon. The slow build of soot on an unkempt chimney. The thaw comes later each year, and the zippers are more stubborn. Last August, I bathed in my own heat until an old woman in the metro yanked at my sleeve. Coward, she said. And I was ashamed, but also frightened, and could not bring myself to strip down there in the lights and the rush of an incoming train. I know I started by saying that most of the poems in this book were written while I was in Shanghai, but prior to living in China, I was living in Colombia, which was, I feel like Colombia is still in my heart. I really adored living there. And a friend was telling me about some of the customs around burial, and it just got me to thinking about how we cope with loss. So this is an exploration of that. Death custom. There's too much land here, enough to store every last rotting bit as long as we like. In closer country, measures are taken, bones dug up after a few years, an emptying as natural as a weekend morning when the jam no longer fits on the shelf in the refrigerator, when you pull each tub out of its corner and pop the lid, examine the damage. The chill slows things down, but nothing stops the mold. Best to toss the whole mess in the trash, but even then the spores get away from you, drifting along the hallway, demanding attention after the forgetting. They know they were worthy once of preservation. What is a grave, if not a cabinet, for the things we have let wait too long? I'll stay in the Americas with this one. I don't know if anyone else does this, but sometimes a news story comes across my radar and it screams poem to me, and I take terrible liberties sometimes, but this one is rooted in a headline that came across my news feed while I was working on these poems. It's called Detachment. A man in Mexico built an island out of plastic bottles, stitched it together with mangrove roots, and took to the sea. I've seen the seams come out of things. Last night at dinner, I collected a friend's words in my soup bowl, but could not eat them, even with bread. In the metro, I touch strangers' hair, pluck a strand as the doors open. If someone would punch me, I could go home. A storm ricocheted bottles along the coast. The man washed up somewhere, slept for a few days, went back to gathering plastic. In the alley outside my building, the rain comes every afternoon. Looking at my time here. Just a fun fact about me. So I grew up in a town of under 400 people in rural Texas. So teeny tiny town. And then upon moving to Shanghai I think the official population now is 29 million. My Mandarin instructor was aghast when I told her how many people were in my hometown. I think I counted, it's actually fewer than 2 floors of my apartment building where I was living in Shanghai. And that could be a little overwhelming at times. That's a big jump in experience, but I also loved the ability to see so much humanity, see the interesting things people were doing, and just be surrounded by that at all times. So this is an ode to that feeling. To the man who practices an old keyboard 2 floors up. Let's pretend electricity doesn't come into it, that the only current driving your notes is the rush of impulse across synapse, down the dark tunnels of your fingers onto the white expanse of key, moth skittering across frozen pane. That the imagined tilt of hammer and string is the buzz of wings catching themselves against air. The arpeggio you practiced Thursday unwound 1 beat at a time, like the socks the downstairs neighbor hangs on his line, but wetter, drops falling fatter and faster until I peered out at the city from behind a waterfall of sound. The weight of it vibrated the concrete around me. I listen for your mistakes, collect them. I kept the 6th you wedged into the coda this morning, ugly and comforting. Okay, I'm going to read 2 more. I think I have time for that. And I feel like I'm falling into this rhythm of reading poems that are sort of opposed to each other, and I haven't noticed this before. So I don't know. We'll see how this goes. This one's called White Noise. I ordered silence online from the makers of that robot vacuum, the one that terrifies cats. They claim it will ricochet through my life, siphoning the mewling of the computer in its dark cubby, the shiver of leaves, even the snap of fish beaks against coral, the air conditioner accelerating endlessly around its distant track. I asked customer support if there was an attachment to suck the cacophony out of my head. For this, I said I would pay extra, whatever they asked, really. No response came. I lay on the rug, The machine ran along my legs, the side of my face. I imagined as loudly as possible, waiting for the indicator to switch on, for the whir and pinch of suction. The room is quiet now. Even the stuffing in the couch does not exhale beneath my weight. Okay, last one. This one is titled Subtraction. 5 apples. A stranger takes one. There are 4. I eat them. Or maybe the freeze comes late after the buds and the branches hang heavy and bare as my hand reaching for the coffee I forget I have given up. Wine still in its bottle. A mind beating blankly against its shell. Bare is the road that ends at my hometown, the accent that has finally released my tongue and lips into vagrancy. I have 3 memories. Time takes 2. There is 1, but it isn't worth keeping. I forget. Then there is a white space where I am meant to write an answer. Thank you so much again, everyone. And I can't wait to hear you read, Julie.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Alice. I'm always struck by how your poetry offers such deep introspection, and yet at the same time, it really wakes me up, like in a completely new way from like the depth of the introspection. It's an interesting place that your poems help me travel. So I just really appreciate getting to hear. Reading the poems, of course, is one thing, but I love when I get to hear them in your voice. And I've had such a pleasure of being able to hear you read from Station Lights a number of times now. And I hope that those of you listening today will appreciate what you heard, and of course, consider purchasing the wonderful Station Lights from the, as I said, ever introspective Alice Pettway. Thank you again. Beautiful. What a reading. Well, sometimes we have a quartet and sometimes we have a trio. And I have to say, we began with trios, and there's something about the nature of angles in triangles that is attractive to me. There's something magical about three stars in a constellation reading. So our final star in that constellation today is Julie Marie Wade, who you've heard read here on Cultivating Voices, also joined us for our second annual Poetry Pride Parade. Much gratitude for you being here with us back in June. And it is always a journey when I get to experience the hybridity and the stories and the poetry and there's a glee that Julie Marie Wade has with words. But that glee leads to such revelations And the combination of those is very present in her newest collection, Skirted. A little more about Julie Marie Wade. Julie Marie Wade teaches in the creative writing program at Florida International University and reviews regularly for Lambda Literary Review and the Rumpus. She is the author of 14 collections of poetry, prose, and hybrid forms, including Wishbone, a memoir in fractures, When I Was Straight, Same Sexy Marriage, Just an Ordinary Woman Breathing, and her, as I said, her newest poetry collection, Skirted. Julie is the winner of the Lambda Literary Award for Lesbian Memoir and the Marie Alexander Poetry Series. She is married to Angie Griffith and lives in Dania Beach, Florida. Julie is one of the poets that who am I going to rush to try to meet when I can meet someone in person that I've not met in person but met on Zoom before? Julie's at the top of my list. Many of you are a very close second, but I think Julie, you're at the top of my list. Please welcome Julie Marie Wade.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandy. You're at the top of my list too. I know you're in Washington State. I'm from Seattle originally. That's where I grew up. And so I have a connection to you and to Alice as well through that place. I have lived a lot of other places since then, and now I find myself in South Florida, where it is very hot and very beautiful. But thank you for always making your introductions. It's a beacon of unconditional positive regard. Thank you so much. You make us all feel so good, Sandy, and we also love your poems. It's a pleasure to read with these two poets. It's an honor to follow them. And I have planned to read 4 poems from Skirted, which looks like this. If you can see it, there it is. There's my camera. And then I'll actually close with a newer poem. We'll get to that later. This book is like a lot of things that I write. We keep coming back to the same resident of years and questions. And so for me, a lot of my work is about queer coming of age, the lesbian love story that I am personally living. And those are easier to write about in some ways because they have a lot of happy factors to them. But this book took me a long time to finish, in part because it's also a book that reckons with estrangement from the family that you come from. So you're building a new family, but you're also leaving an old family to which you can't return. And I noticed that this theme comes up a lot in films recently. And on the one hand, it's kind of exciting to see more family dramas that address, having queer children in their midst. But I also realized that in most of those films, even the most intractably difficult relationships just sort of magically resolve, where the parents just accept the child and their partner and everything just works out. And that's always presented as the only way that the child can be happy, like the grown child. And so I wanted to write a book that I think is kind of a hard book. It might be a hard book to read too, but where there's also a happy ending that doesn't necessarily lead to reconciliation. So I'm going to read 4 poems that kind of come at the topic of estrangement, and then I'm going to shift at the end to something a little more maybe hopeful and lighter. So the first poem is the first poem in the book. It's a prelude. It's called Prelude, What I Wish Had Happened. That the sea had risen in sudden fury, over the bulkheads lacy with moss, rough with barnacles and bits of shell, over the slippery rocks and the dark trenches of sand pocked by clams still breathing beneath them, over even the splintered, lice-ridden logs. Then with the vigor of something like love, over the promenades also, and the footpaths arcing into the woods, over the ball fields with their broken fences and the battered poison ivy signs, that the sea had kept rising through the city park, its horseshoe pit shaded by lilacs, its swing sets ancient and loosely hinged, that it had flowed onto Fauntleroy Way in time with the evening rush, crash, that the row of cars waiting for their ferry ride home were left bobbing there, chrome buoys in a salt-drenched storm. That the sea, which I had always known was coming for me, came at last, gliding over concrete, scaling the grassy banks with its liquid fingers, pouring through the lattice work of the red gate that separated our yard from all the others, then rising to the height of the picture windows where I picture my parents together still, winding their grandfather clock, slashing each calendar square, which is to say, sad without knowing they are sad, frightened of time moving and time standing still. This sea will fracture that glass, and with it the tiny, treacherous globe of all my past lives, even the old paperweight world resting on the desk, smoothed with felt on the underside to keep it from slipping away. Of this I am certain, what we can't stop, in the end, we destroy. But if miraculous and auspicious a flood begins, like the hired gun of the heart's truest intention, we surrender everything, merchandise and misgivings, the old grudge and the ensuing plan, until even the baby grand is newly repurposed, a boat seeping its soggy music, tender and futile against the faithless white spume. Obliteration, we say, or a new beginning. Thank you. The second poem is called Empathy for Electra. I talk with my students a lot about how some things are hard to write as yourself, and so a mythic proxy can help. So this is Empathy for Electra, who was not easy, that ganglion of a girl, axon smooth and dendrite scattered, cleft nerves of neural illusion. Something in us always favors revenge, a line drawn, then crossed, transversals of mischief and myelin. As myth renders the meaning secondary to the source, so also the primary lust, the primitive passion, for all that mother and father could not give, and for what it would mean to live without them. Be it heart, or be it brave cerebellum that bears the burden of balancing between extremes. And maybe she did leave Mycenae at the wrong moment, and maybe, yes, her path was brambled, whether or not their own was bent. But there's a place in the palm where the lifeline drops off, and the tines of the line are revenge or remorse or regret. Who could fault her years of falter? With her butterfly net and her wishing you wells, who could fault her? That salty air, those meager coins, plumbing an ancient pause. Was it wanting them back, or was it wanting them new? And to follow on that theme, what Nimrod should have known. The word, like wood, is porous and prone to sliver. The tongue, which is called mother, answers to 100 other names. The stutterer, child of slow elocution, of swift permutation, utters an equivalent truth. Even wrapped in Eve's garments, even wielding the sword of Adam's violent vernacular, the Jenga puzzle of speech totters, glottal stopped in the throat of forthcoming and forgotten, on the lips of the blotted horizon, where eminent and imminent splinter into reef and wave, and the twin pillars of the crushed tower jut forth from the sea, one boasting silence, the other cacophony. And then this is a poem called Wayne, and it's the only poem in this book I think maybe I have never read out loud ever for an audience. And I don't know if other poets do this, but there's a date that's referenced, a number of years that's referenced in this poem. And as I wrote it really early, and then I kept upping the years. So it was sort of like my own clock. And then when the book went to be published right before the start of this year, I put in the last date. So I know now it's also a posterity marker of a poignant kind. But this is Wayne. It's always about something, she claims. You can't have a story where nothing happens. It's about to be winter, but Zeno's paradox suggests winter, so-called, will never arrive. What does that mean for the leaves, for the trees, legions of them, unshaken, unstirred? Maybe it's a story about pilgrims, ordinary people, agnostic, afraid. Does penance have to have a purpose? It's about to be my mother's birthday. All right, I confess, I've never been to confession. Well, once, almost. I told someone else's story. I lied. What did you say had happened? That my parents died in a car crash, like Pollyanna's. She thinks it was a train. Does it matter? Maybe it's a story about orphans then, ordinary people, agnostic, afraid. It's about to be Christmas, but Zeno's paradox suggests Christmas, so-called, will never arrive. What does that mean for the cloud silt and the snow salt, the sideways slant of the torrid sea rain? Pluto used to be a planet. I remember so well, my very exceptional mother just served us 9 pizzas. Were you always fond of mnemonics? No, but I get lonely now when I look at the night sky. Isn't science a story too? Maybe it's really a story about pirates, how they earn a living when the bounty hunting's bad, shoveling driveways, scraping windshields, selling, if it comes to that, their own blood. It's about to be 20 years since I couldn't go home again. Zeno's paradox suggests I, so-called, can never go back. When the priest was done, he told me, go say 10 Hail Marys, but I only ever said 3. What were you waiting for? The snowman melting with the derelict eyes, the picture book comprised of pie charts, the grandfather to tuck me in and whisper goodnight moon. Check the wall clock with the one bad hand. The cop shouts, stick 'em up. The gambler calls, fold. The sleeper knows it's about to be morning. So that's the sort of sequence from Skirted. I haven't read like that particular sequence before, but it felt like the right occasion to do it. And then because I've gotten to know Sandy over this past year and a half, though we have not yet met in person, I know there's a poem that she really loves that is an unpublished poem that I wrote not long ago for a young woman who was struggling with coming out to a family where she was concerned about how they would receive her. And so this poem is called Out Here, and I thought it might be a good counterpoint to some of the hardnesses in the other poems. So this is my last poem. Thank you for listening. It's called Out Here. Out here, the air is clear. The water has gone down under the bridge, the same bridge that once was burning. And you've heard the way they say the daffodils are out now, and other kinds of flowers, by which they mean their green stems have given rise to blossoms, and you are blooming too. The fist of your heart clenched so tight for so long inside you, now slowly unfurling. The air is clear, though you may be breathing heavy, your voice a slim missile of light against the vast, dark landscape. You wonder who can even hear you out here, if anyone is even listening. The stars peer back, merely curious, tracing your whereabouts as you once traced theirs. The moon has been accused of phases too, but marvels how they still say constant as the moon. An orbit is not a weakness. A body, heavenly or otherwise, is not a metaphor. Just think of the first time you ever wandered into the woods. Someone told you to hide, so you ran toward the nearest thicket, crouching down, counting silently to yourself in the underbrush, fearing at first the rustle of feet, but later fearing the absence of the rustle. Had they forgotten you after all? Out of sight, out of mind. The air was thick with smoke. Someone had been burning leaves. It was late autumn, and you followed the spice of the wind toward a clearing. You had never felt so small as when you stood in the center of the open field, but your lungs swelled. You shouted and heard the out in it. Even then, the way your throat became a bright flower, a tulip huge and red, opening in the unobstructed light of the wrong season. Ollie, ollie, oxen free. It was a forecast, but you didn't know that then. A rallying cry. You wanted them to find you so much. The daylight broad, the future far away as the riverhead, or the ending of a fairy tale. And when at last they came, they were waving with their mittens on fingers fused into a single woolen spade. You followed when they said there was a fire, a wildfire, they said. And even then you wondered if there was any other kind. Tonight the air is clear, the spring indisputable as dew, the crisp, cool newness of it, which is sometimes called splendor and sometimes called terror. You raise your hand like a flare, you close your eyes and stutter, come out, wherever you are. You are waiting under the new moon beneath the loom of these impossible trees, but we are coming. I promise. We are rustling our way toward you, murmuring, welcome. Some of us rain swept, some of us wind shook, though some of us are closer than you can imagine. Some of us are glowing like fireflies, our small light unmistakable. Some of us are already here. Thank you.
I have to do everything I can not to cry right now. Thank you. Thank you so much for the reading from Skirted. What I was really thinking so much about was how the strangeness of estrangement and how you're able to bring not just a poignancy, of course there's a poignancy to it, but it's, you know, this is my favorite word, prismatic, right? It's the prismatic way that the heart wrench can also be beautiful. And also, there is nothing, I know everyone heard this today in your work and Lillo's work and Alice's work. There's nothing like the tintinnabulation of your poems. Don't think I've ever used the word tintinnabulation to describe it, but it's like that tuning fork, like it's just like the perfect sound of words flowing, amazing. And the connection with those stories. I'm taken. I'm just taken. I'm gonna stop now. Thank you also for reading out here. You know that, yeah, just poem is near and dear to me. So I so appreciate it. So many comments for all three of you in the chat, everyone. How about we take a moment and unmute and show our deepest gratitude and appreciation to our three poets today, Lillo Way, Alice Pettway, and Julie Marie Wade. What a amazing reading that you all shared with us.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work.
Fantastic.
Really, I want to encourage you all. Thank you, everybody. The magic when you can bring the right three together for a reading.
Yeah.
I think we heard that today. So beautiful. Well, I just have a few last bit of housekeeping to share with you all. So if any of you have any upcoming readings or announcements about anything, feel free to type those in the chat now while I'm just reminding you of some upcoming things here that we have with Cultivating Voices. You know, Muriel Rukeyser, the poet, wrote, "Exchange is creation, and the human energy involved is consciousness." I think we had the example of that today, but I also want to encourage you to think about exchange as creation so that you, dear folks, bring your poetry, your humanity, and your consciousness to exchange and create community with us next Sunday, where we're going to have our wild card live open mic, where you can sign up to be one of our 12 featured poets, 6 minutes each, to showcase your poetry that supports our mission here at Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, to share your poetry, to expand our understanding and connections with each other. You can always register for all our Cultivating Voices live poetry readings on the event pages each week that you see on our Facebook page or circling around in other venues on Facebook. And of course, you can always watch live from our Facebook group page. I, again, want to thank you for all of you in our audience for joining us today. And of course, to our three poets, Lillo and Alice and Julie, again, just what a reading. I'm kind of dumbstruck, struck. I'm just struck. And that's what I go to poetry for. So thank you personally and on behalf of everyone else. Thanks also to Don Krieger, of course. We cannot do this without Don, who provides so much support in our production of our weekly gatherings. And although she's not with us today, a shout out to Kim Ports Parsons for her always vivid, inviting graphics that lure us in each week to listen to poetry. Well, our humanity has always and continues through these times to really depend on our deep listening of one another. We had exquisite examples of that today. So I want to encourage you to keep doing that deep listening. And please, in doing that, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and of course, take care of your beloveds this week and always. And always keep writing. I'm Sandy Yannone, Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. Have a great week and hope to see you next time. Be well, everybody, and thank you.